Nat Turner was a slave who led one of the bloodiest slave uprisings in U.S. history. His rebellion spread terror and horror, which led to stricter laws and punishment to disenfranchise black slaves even more. Nat Turner, also known as the Prophet, was loved by many but hated by most. You be the judge.
Nat Turner was born October 2nd, 1800, on a Virginia plantation. His mother's name was Nancy, but very little is known about his father. Some believe that Nat's father was Benjamin Turner, the plantation owner. Many believe Benjamin Turner was Nat's father because Nat was very light-skinned, and Benjamin didn't treat him like a regular slave because he allowed him to read and write. No one ever confirmed the speculation, so Nat insisted his father ran away from home.
Since Nat learned to read, he was encouraged to read the Bible. His devout grandmother, Old Bridget, who was very religious, sparked the interest in him to become religious.
When Nat was not working the fields, he was reading the Bible and preaching the gospel to anyone who would listen. Nat wasn't very sociable with his peers unless it had something to do with religion. Nat was very serious, and he spent his leisure time fasting and praying.
Nat, his mother, grandmother, and other slaves on Mr. Benjamin's plantation were all loaned to Samuel L. Turner, Mr. Benjamin's son, to establish his cotton plantation. This move was only supposed to be temporary, but Mr. Benjamin was struck with an illness and eventually died, which made Nat and his family stay at Samuel's plantation permanently. On Samuel Turner's plantation, Nat allegedly married a young slave woman named Cherry. The two were happily married until she and Nat were sold after Samuel Turner died. Cherry was sold to Giles Reese, and Nat was sold to Thomas Moore for $400. Nat was heartbroken and angry that he was separated from his wife and family. Nat channeled his anger towards fasting and prayer. While working in the fields, Nat had his first vision. He saw white spirits battling black spirits. Nat felt that he was ordained to bring an end to the injustice of enslavement and seeing loved ones separated from each other. After watching loved ones being whipped and hung in trees, Nat was tired of being treated less than a man, and he felt the time has come to stand up and eliminate the evil spirits. Nat felt that the only way to free his people from the unjust conditions of slavery was to kill all the white people in the South. This included white women and children. He felt that if he spared white children, they would grow up to be just like their evil parents. So white women and children were not excluded from his rampage.
Nat continued to conduct his religious services by preaching the Word of God. Nat's reputation expanded throughout different plantations in the area. Mr. Brantley, a white alcoholic overseer, requested that Nat Turner baptize him at Pearson Mill Pond. Nat continued to have visions of the pending Judgment Day. Even though he had the vision, he knew he had to wait until he received further sign from God.
Thomas Moore died, and that became the property of Thomas Moore's son, Putnam. However, when Putnam's mother remarried, that was no longer the property of Putnam, but he became the property of Joseph Travis.
Although Nat's new owner was very kind, he still felt the day would come to annihilate the whites in Southampton County. Nat thought that the day for him to make his move was in February of 1831 because there was a solar eclipse that took place. Nat and his small army was prepared to strike until Nat fell ill and Nat had to postpone his revolt.
Nat's plan of attack was to use guerrilla warfare. He felt that it was best to attack the enemy without their knowledge. Nat and his army began their attack at 2 a.m. on Monday morning, August 22nd, 1831. Nat and his army secretly entered his slave owner's house. While the Travis family was sound asleep, Nat and his followers quietly opened the bedroom door where Joseph Travis was sleeping. Nat took his hatchet and struck Joseph Travis, but his blow did not kill him. So his follower delivered the death blow to Joseph Travis. Nat and his army ramshacked the house, going from one room to the next, killing everyone in sight. As Nat and his followers left the Travis house, they realized they left the baby in the cradle. So one of the followers went back to kill the baby in the cradle.
Nat and his army went from house to house, killing every white person in sight. By noon, Nat's army started to grow, and other free and non-free blacks joined in on his rampage. Throughout this rebellion, the army killed over 60 white people.
As the slaves were making their way to Jerusalem, the nearest town, whites heard about the rebellion, and they quickly joined together with their guns to attack the insurgents. Many of Nat's men were wounded. After losing some of his men, Nat tried to recruit more slaves from different plantations, but the slaves didn't feel confident to get involved because Nat's army was not as strong as the white militia.
Many members of the Black Rebellion Army dispersed into the woods, hoping to escape the white militia. Nat's army was being captured one by one, while Nat was on the run hiding out. Over 200 innocent slaves were murdered by the white militia. The murder of innocent slaves came as a result of the revolt led by Nat's army. The white militia terrified black slaves by displaying skulls of beheaded innocent slaves at crossroads. This display was a reminder to every black slave: if they ever think about starting a revolt and going against the white power system, the same thing will happen to them.
While on the run, Nat had to sneak out at night to get water and food. However, he quickly returned to his hiding spot for fear of being caught. While in hiding, two blacks who were hunting with their dog discovered Nat because their dog sniffed his food. Nat asked the two black hunters not to tell anyone, but Nat didn't trust the black hunters. So Nat changed his hiding spot, and he decided to dig a hole under a fallen tree. Nat was later discovered with a gun cocked and aimed at his head by Mr. Phipps. Nat pleaded for him not to shoot and that he would surrender.
Nat was taken to prison where he was severely whipped while awaiting trial. Nat was appointed a lawyer, Thomas Gray, who talked to Nat about why he started his revolt. Nat's answers will be later written into a book by Thomas Gray, The Confessions of Nat Turner.
Nat was found guilty as an insurgent and was sentenced to be hanged at noon on November 11, 1831.
Nat was hung and his body was desecrated. His body was skinned, he was beheaded, many of his body parts were cut off to be used as souvenirs, and the remains of his body was burned.
After the execution of Nat Turner, new laws were passed. The Virginia legislature passed new laws making it unlawful to teach slaves, free blacks, or mulattoes to read or write. This resulted in widespread illiteracy amongst black people in the South. The new state laws restricted all blacks from holding religious meetings without the presence of a licensed white minister. Many whites prohibited blacks from congregating together because they feared that the slaves would try to uprise against them again. Slaveholders felt if they can keep the slaves divided and competing for acceptance and praise, they would fight each other instead of fighting the whites.
Even though Nat Turner's rebellion is one of the bloodiest rebellions since the Haitian Revolution, measures and tactics were put into place to prevent blacks from uprising against the evil system of slavery.